Hello, Millonarios. I'm Priscila Aubin, Millonario's Chief Communications Officer, and today I have the pleasure to interview the acclaimed journalist and best-selling author from United States, Shane Snow. He has been in the running for the Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism and had his writing in GQ, Fast Company, Wired, and the New York magazines. Shane is currently a teamwork consultant for Fortune 500 brands and speaks globally about innovation and human behavior. And today, he will be talking with us about leadership when working with remote teams. Hello, Shane. Welcome to Millonario Masterminds. We are very thankful to have you as part of the Millonario family and here with us today.
Hi, Priscila. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, that's a pleasure for us. Well, so if you're ready, let's start with the questions.
Okay.
So before we start with the questions about leading in remote, could you tell us what's exactly a remote team?
Sure. So a remote team is when you're collaborating from different places. So you're working together, but you're not physically together. And I actually like starting with this question because there's a lot of things that we default to assuming in business. And one of them has historically been that if you're on a team, you're in the same place. But as basically the whole world knows after the last year, and I think a lot of people knew before that, we don't have to be in the same place to be on a team. Remote teamwork is when we're working together, but we're in all sorts of different places. But that concept kind of opens up, I think, the possibility that there's more than one way to have a team, and the people that can be part of your team don't have to be the people we traditionally think of. And that ties into a lot of the work that I do. So so the short answer is you're working together, but you're not together. But thinking of it that way, I think, opens up a lot of possibilities.
All right, that was really clarifying. So now that we all know what's a remote team, could you tell us what are the biggest difference between being an in-person leader and a leader of a remote team?
Sure. So people look to leaders for guidance, for support, for clarity, for information. A lot of times we look to leaders for answers, or for courage, those kinds of things. And in an in-person scenario, the leader who's giving that to the team is seen all the time. But in a remote team, the leader is not seen. You might see their avatar, you might see them typing, but you don't walk into the workplace and just see the leader doing those things, giving confidence, giving answers. And I would say that this creates some problems, but also some opportunities. As a leader, you need people to know what they need to do. You need people to feel like they're part of something. You need people to trust you. And if they don't see you, it's harder to do that. But when you're forced to work remotely and to do things differently, it also makes, I think, leaders, it forces them to be deliberate about how they do those things, how they make sure people have information, how they make sure that people know that they're part of something, how they give people confidence. And it also kind of forces you as a leader to trust people more, to make decisions themselves, for them to be smart, not just to lean on you to be smart. And so there's plenty of things that can go wrong with remote leadership, but our default with leadership, I think, is the leader shows up and they're like, I'm here, trust me, I got the answers. You can see that I'm leading. When you can't see them, it changes how they have to do that. And I think it forces you to be more deliberate about those things, which I think is a very good thing.
Wow, yeah, that's really interesting, and it makes total sense. And from the eyes of an expert in leadership, what are the pros and cons of managing a remote team?
So the pros are there's more flexibility, for sure. People can work how they need to, and when they need to, and from where they need to. There can be cons to that as well, right? If you have a small house, or you have kids or grandkids, or some things going on in your workspace because you're working from home, that can be challenging. But as a leader, you have flexibility to let people work the best way that they can, which means they can do better work. And you have the flexibility to work the way that you want to. And actually, there's a component of this as well where because you have to be more hands-off as a remote leader, it frees you up to do more strategic thinking and to spend time on the things you should be spending time on rather than just monitoring things. But the cons really are, it's harder to build trust. It's harder to feel like you're part of something bigger and together as the leader, and also to help your team feel those things. And it's harder for you as the leader to see what other people are doing, to see how they're doing. You walk into an office and you can tell if someone's having a bad day. And if you're a good leader, you can go over and see what you can do for them, ask how you can help. But you can't see that when you're just over a chat. So you can't be seen as a leader, and that creates challenges but opportunities. And you can't see people, and that creates challenges. But it also does create opportunities for you to be more deliberate about checking in with people. Because if you, again, walk into the office and you notice someone and they seem fine, you may not check in with them and ask how they're doing. And they may just be good at not showing that they're not doing okay. Whereas in a remote setting, you ought to check in with everyone and then everyone feels included. So it sort of forces you, once again, to do things that can be helpful. But the big con is that trust factor. It's how do you get people to trust that everyone's doing the right things, that you know what you're doing, or that you trust them when they can't see you, when you're not spending time together and you're not getting all of the kind of non-verbal cues that you get in a office setting. That is very challenging as a remote leader.
Yeah, it really seems like a big challenge. And in your point of view, what are the most important skills a person should have to be a good remote leader?
So I think the foundational thing is being able to build and show trust and to identify when trust isn't there. Because if you trust each other, then you can do kind of everything that you need to in order to solve other problems. So if you have trust, then people will be willing to speak up when they have a risky thing on their mind. They have an idea that might not work, but is worth bringing forward anyway. If you have trust, then people will speak up when there's problems. They'll come to you to talk through problems rather than just worrying or having side conversations or gossip or just being miserable. But if you don't have trust, none of that happens. So as a leader, building trust and knowing what to do to build trust is ultra important anyway. But with remote teams, it's doubly important. And one of the main things that I've spent a lot of time writing about lately over the last year, as I've been helping leaders to do remote teamwork better, is this idea that trust is, from a psychological standpoint, it's built on kind of three things that if they happen consistently, you'll trust people. And most of us focus on kind of the least effective of those three things when we're trying to build trust. The three things are competence. So you trust people who are good at what they do. They have abilities. You trust people who have integrity. So they do what they say they'll do. They're honest about what they tell you. And then you trust people that have benevolence or show benevolence. And really what that is they show and you're sure you trust that when things get hard, they will do what's right for other people. They won't be selfish, basically. And the thing with leadership is when we want people to trust us, we often default to trying to show our competence. We try to make sure that people know that we're smart, we have things down, we have things under control, we have abilities and skills, and so you can trust us. But if you have all of that and people don't trust that you're honest, then it doesn't matter how competent you are. And if you have all of that, and even if you are honest, but they believe that you're selfish, they believe that you don't have their best interests at heart, they won't trust you either. And in fact, the more competent you prove yourself to be, the smarter you are in their minds. If you don't care about them, the worse it is, right? Because a smart person who doesn't care about you is much more threatening, much more of a problem than a dumb person who doesn't care about you. So the advice that I give to leaders when they're working generally with teams, but especially on remote teams, is you have to do things that show that you care, that prove your benevolence, that people can trust that if things get hard, you're going to do what's right for them before you do what's right for yourself, or you're going to find a way to do what's right for everyone rather than being selfish. And that takes a lot of time, I think, to develop. It takes consistency, but it is about the little things you do to show that you care. So checking in with people to see how they're doing, actually, honestly, digging in and asking them what's going on and seeing how you can help. May sound like an obvious and little thing, but that shows that you care about them. So that's one of many things that you can do as a leader to build that benevolence-based trust. And this ties into, I think, the second thing that I'd say, which is emotional intelligence becomes especially important with remote leadership, because you need to understand that everyone's different, everyone's personalities are different, and so people handle things differently. And when you can't see their faces, you can't see them as a human being, you can't look at what they're going through, all you can see is the text they're writing, or maybe once in a while a video call, and it's easy to make up a story in your head about how they are doing things wrong, or they're not reacting the way that you would. And so a leader who understands that how you would react is not how other people would react. We all have different tendencies. We all have different challenges or different reactions to things. That helps you to put yourself in their shoes. So when things go wrong, or things get confusing, or whatever, something isn't how you want it to be, instead of reacting in a way that is accusatory or that immediately goes to, well, they're not good enough because they're not doing it how I would do, you can put yourself in their shoes and say, well, they're different than me. They may react to things different than me, and also they're in a situation that I don't understand, and I don't know what's going on their end because I can't see them. And so when you start to do that, you can basically treat people with a little more charity, which is one of the principles that I'll talk about in my Millonario session. But there's this idea that if you have a situation that's bad that happens, or that doesn't meet your expectations, you can be cynical about it. You can assume the worst. Priscilla was late to the meeting because she doesn't care. So you can make that assumption, and then I got to make you prove to me that you do care and that I can trust you again. Or you can give benefit of the doubt, which is I can say, well, Priscilla was late to the meeting, so I'll wait to see what she says before I decide if she sucks or not. But the principle of charity is basically the first thought that I can have, or the first reaction I can have, is if Priscilla is late to the meeting, I say, well, I hope she's okay. Something must have gone wrong out of her control, or something must have come up that's important. So when we do finally meet, I can say, hey, is everything okay? You were late for the meeting. I assume that something must have happened. Is everything all right? Then you believe that I care about you. You believe that I'm not accusing you. And chances are you're going to be less defensive about that conversation. And even if you were late because you did something wrong and not because something happened to you, you were late because you slept in or something. If I say, hey, is everything okay? You'll be more likely to say, actually, I slept in and I'm really sorry, but you believe now that I care about you. And if you sleep in, 5 times, then we have a different conversation. That's a different thing. But approaching your interactions as a leader from that standpoint builds an enormous amount of trust and helps other people to basically feel okay telling you the hard things. But it gives you more options as a leader. So those are the things that I recommend focusing on the most for leaders of remote teams. There's a million other things that you can do, but if you can get people to believe that you have benevolence and integrity, then when things go wrong, you can talk about them and you can treat each other like humans and get people's cooperation and get options so that you can solve problems without things derailing or dissolving.
Okay, I see.
That was a long answer.
Yeah, it was nice, but the example helped. And I swear I won't sleep in 5 times. Well, so to finish with the questions about, leadership with remote teams, I'd like to ask you to give us some advice on how a leader could improve a company's productivity by managing remote teams.
Yeah, this is such a good question. I think that one of the biggest time wasters with remote work is communication, and specifically inefficient communication. So we need to communicate more clearly when we're remote, when we can't see each other, because we need to share information. We need to be on the same page about, what's what and what's not. But what happens is we tend to have always on, always urgent communication going in remote teams. It happens in in-person teams a little bit less, but it still happens. But the biggest piece of advice that I could give is agree with each other on your team. What are the methods of communication for different levels of urgency? So what I mean by that is if, say you and I were on a team together and we're starting to collaborate, we could say that, there's going to be emergencies sometimes, like real emergencies where we need to get a hold of each other now. And in that case, we'll call each other on the phone. So if I get a phone call from you, I will pick it up because I know it's an emergency. And we'll agree that we won't call each other on the phone out of the blue with no warning if it's not an emergency. And if you call me and you're like, hey, what should I get for lunch? I'm going to say, hey, this is not what unannounced phone calls are for. And we can reset that boundary. But we can agree on that. And then we can say, well, what about things that are important but can wait, a few minutes or an hour or so? Well, for that, send a direct message or a Slack message or a group chat or something. Chat is for things that can wait a little bit, but need answers to fairly quickly. And then what about things that can wait till the end of the day or till the next day? Let's use email for that. So we could say that's our system that we create. What it does is it makes it so that I can spend time focusing on my work. You can spend time focusing on your work without having to worry that you're missing something communication-wise. So you can close down your chat app for an hour or two while you work on something, and then you can open it back up to check in, because that's the agreement we have as a team. That's how we'll work. Rather than what most remote teams do is they have chat open and they're trying to work, and then they get into chat all the time and they keep wasting little bits of time. And the switching costs of thinking about these things really dampens productivity. And then, you can, at the end of the day or the start of your next day, open your emails and handle that and schedule time for that. And that's fine. But it allows you to have those work blocks. And this leads into, I think, the thing that I've seen work really well with teams that I've worked with and that I've consulted for, which is have everyone tell each other their ideal work style and work schedule. We actually built a little survey tool that asks you questions that generates a little report that you can send to your colleagues. It's a work style survey, but the basic questions are: when do you do your best work, your best uninterrupted work? Like, what time of the day would you prefer to not have interruptions so you can be heads down and really be productive? What times of day do you generally have the most capacity for, paying attention to other people, having hard conversations, having meetings, that sort of thing? And where do you work from? Are you working from home? Do you have an office? Can you work outside? What's the deal on the other end of the webcam when we're doing meetings? And then, what's the preferred way to get a hold of you in an emergency? And if you learn this about your colleagues, then what you can do is you can start adapting how you communicate, how you work with them, when you bother them, to what their unique, preferences are, their situation is. And what that shows is that, one, you care. So if I know that in the afternoons, that's when your head's down doing your work, your best work, then I'm not going to try to schedule meetings in the morning rather than the afternoons. So try to spare your afternoons for that. And if I know that you like meetings in the afternoons, then I'll try and do that. And me just trying to accommodate that shows that I care, shows that benevolence, it builds that trust, but also makes the whole team more productive. Now, once again, it's a long answer, but this idea that we should allow each other the space and time to do our best work, and then have agreements on how we'll communicate, when we'll communicate, so that we can use communication to clear the way, to support each other, rather than distract each other all day long with chats and emails.
Yeah, so it's exactly to lead the team to work as a team, right? And not, well, that was very interesting. Thanks a million, Shane, for the interview. It was really great to learn a little bit more about remote teams with you today. But before we say goodbye, I would like to tell you that we can't wait to see you and be in your masterclass here in Millonario Masterminds 2021. And I'd like to ask you if you could tell us a little bit of what were you going to teach in the masterclass.
Sure. So I teach normally I teach a 10-day series of workshops called the Dream Team's Leadership Intensive. And basically we go through 10 different habits for upgrading your leadership abilities, whether you're remote or in person. And it's focused on understanding the human behavior science of people, both leaders and the people you lead, and then using that science to develop little habits or heuristics. So small rules of thumb or skills that you can use to help communicate better, solve problems better, have more productive brainstorming and debates, and to motivate people as a leader. And so what I'm doing for my Millonario session is I'm condensing all of that down into a half day where we're getting into the best of that leadership content so that you can accelerate your leadership abilities by mastering a handful of habits all in one day. You'll leave with a lot of stuff that you'll practice and want to refer back to over and over again. But we want you to walk out of that session with a whole bunch of new things that you can do that are easy on your time and effort, but make a big impact with your teams. So that's what my leadership intensive at Millonario is going to be about.
Oh, it sounds incredible, Shane. We were really looking forward to have you here in Barcelona on July 17th and 18th for Millonario Masterminds 2021.
Well, thank you. Barcelona is one of my favorite cities in the world. I want to live there one day, so I'm excited to be there with everyone and to enjoy Millonario and for my session.
Yeah, it's a really great place to be, and we are hoping to do a big event in here from now on as Millonario Masterminds with your help. Well, so to finish, thank very much again for your time to be here today with us and to have accepted to come here to Barcelona and be part of our Millonario family.
Well, thank you.
Wow. So thank you and goodbye.